Hey folks, so today we have a roomy schedule, and that is on purpose because I want you to really take your time with the activities that I have slated for you today, all right? So the first thing that we're gonna do is we're going to learn how to identify a thesis statement in an academic article. And this is something that is going to not just help you in this class, but in other classes. The reason why you want to understand the central argument of a person's academic article is because if you don't know what they're saying and where to figure out where it is that they're saying that to you, then it's a lot harder to understand the rest of the article. Okay, so there's a short little video that I explain the places that you can figure out what that person is arguing. So, all right, so that's what that is. All right, so make sure to take your time and check out task 1. Then in the second task, I want you to take part in a Slack discussion. So you have read the Tobin et al. Article, right? And before I actually head off into talking about what I want you to do for this second piece, I want to explain what my job here is in this class. So my job is to teach you how to engage with someone's published academic work and to identify ideas that you think are compelling or interesting, and then use those ideas and cite them and apply it to a different context. So the thing that I want you to keep in mind, right, is that I'm not interested in whether or not you agree with every single thing an article says. That doesn't matter. I read articles all the time that I don't agree with. But the thing is, that's not your job. I want you to think about every time you're reading an academic article, you're headed into a thrift store or you're headed into a reclaimed hardware shop, right? And you run into something, you're like, oh, I could use that, right? To rebuild this other thing or to do this other thing. So that's what I want you to be thinking about when you're reading academic articles, because the whole impulse to be I don't agree with this thing, that's actually not an academic response. But reading something and letting it percolate and being hey, this idea here, this is interesting. And I can totally see it's helping me rethink something even now. So I can totally go back to this and use this idea and reference it to rethink something else. Okay. So by which I mean, maybe someone says something about I don't know, gender in the Tobin et al. Piece. And you're oh, wow. I grew up watching Johnny Bravo, and there's something they said about masculinity in the piece that really stuck with me and made me think about that show or whatever. That's what I mean. You zero in on that idea, and then you take that idea and apply it as a lens to rethink something else. All right. That's what we're doing here. Okay. So the goal here isn't to be oh, I don't agree with this, right? It's hey, this is something neat. And that's what I want you to focus on with this thing that I want you to do in task 2. All right. So you are going to just kind of take a beat, and then you're going to read these questions right here. Zero in on a quote that you found really interesting. Where'd it come from? Why do you think it's so compelling, right? How does it inspire you to think differently about something? And it doesn't have to be one of the Disney movies that they mentioned. It can be something entirely different, right? But just explain, what it is that it's helping you rethink, right? And how can we apply that again to something a different piece of pop culture? Because that's what we're really doing here, okay? Because anything that Tobin et al. Talks about can be talked about for any animated movie, right? If that makes sense. All right. So just sort of keep that in mind. That's what I want you to do. So I want you to, I think it's a good idea to, do something at minimum, do 4 sentences. But if you can get up to 6 sentences, that would probably be better. But just sort of, think about that. So you're going to write out your thing. Most people draft it in a Google Doc just draft it, and then, paste that into Slack. But you can just kind of totally go to Slack and, type in your response there. So you are going to go to the Pop Literacy channel on Slack, right? And so the instructions, right, are right here, right? Again, explaining what to do. And BTW, I actually give you a an example. All right. So if you're not sure like what to post, I kind of like zeroed in on this piece. So this is my like sample, my post, right? So if I were responding to the Tobin piece, this little highlighted bit is what I would have written. So anytime you see something that's like, hey, do you need an example of what to post? That's kind of like me modeling the kinds of things that I am looking for. Okay. And that is there to help you. All right. So you're going to go ahead and do that. And then I want you to, once you're done posting, meaningfully respond to at least 2 of your peers' posts. And by meaningfully respond, I mean like not like, oh, like I agree, but like really engage with them, like, you know, just read their piece, take it seriously, and then respond like you care about it, you know, like you're having a conversation. So, and the reason why I only want you to do that with just like 2 peers is on purpose, because I really want you to take your time to do that. And this isn't an empty exercise. Along, what you're actually doing is we're engaging in these like a series of like scaffolded academic conversations that are helping us kind of sharpen our ideas. Because right now, when we think about children's pop culture, we're like, oh, that was cool. Right? Like you might have watched The Mitchells versus the Machines on Netflix. Neat show. I love that show. It's so cute. But the point is, also Centaur World, if you've not seen that, oh my God. Anyway, that's not the point. Centaur World is hilarious. But whatever the point is that you are going to be taking these ideas that you're reading in these academic articles, and eventually future you is going to be throughout this class applying these academic ideas to different contexts, different animated like children's films. So this is actually helping you practice doing that, right? Which is why I want you to take it seriously, because you're like getting smarter along and along. It's like building a muscle, right? Because generally we're just like, oh, that was super funny. That was super cute. But we're actually putting on a different hat that's kind of like asking us to like think about larger patterns that we're seeing and like why people are representing these things this way and like what it means, right? It's an entirely different set of questions. And that doesn't mean, BTW, that you can't enjoy something and then also kind of like really kind of take it seriously and look at larger patterns and like engage in like criticism of it. And criticism doesn't mean like, oh, I think you're a jerk. It just means like, oh, I'm noticing this thing and why are we doing this? And like, what are the consequences of that? So it's a different kind of way of engaging with pop culture that we normally don't. So that's why practicing is so important, right? And that's why these conversations that we're having is so important. All right. So that's what we're doing in class. Take your time. Okay. So for homework, what I want you to do is I want you to reread the assignment 1 handout. Okay. So go ahead, check that out. And, the first thing that I want you to do is I want you to like practice like step 1. So step 1, I want you to think about step 1 is like just the first time that you're thinking about like whatever animated film it is that you want to talk about. And some people talk about something that they grew up with as a kid. You can also do something that you have just recently watched, right? So that's fine, as long as it's like an animated piece of children's, you know, something, right? And it has to be something you're familiar with, right? Because it's going to ask you to get specific. But the idea is I want you to just kind of like reread this little step 1 thing. And this is basically just asking you to take 45 minutes to like think about a very specific thing, right? That you have recently encountered. Maybe it can be in your childhood, but it can also be something like more contemporary. That's totally fine. And then just like respond to this prompt. Okay. Time yourself for 45 minutes. All right. And I kind of recap what I want you to do. Now, the thing about step 1 is that later on, you're going to come back to this like in another piece of the homework, you know, like future you, right? And you're going to go back to this like rough draft that you're going to save. Right. And so that becomes really, really important because you'll end up like sort of revising it by like applying like academic lenses to it and like expanding things. Right. So, but the idea is, but right now you're just going to focus on step 1, which is to zero in on like some piece of like animated children's pop culture. Some people also do things like, you know, comic books or video games or toys, but you do have to be like super duper familiar with it and be willing to like dive in with detail. And that's why animated films are so much easier, because like there's so much detail, they're rich with detail. Same thing with like graphic novels or comics, right? They're rich with detail. It can be a little bit harder. We tend to speak more generally about toys and even like video games, even though they're like rich environments, mediated environments. We tend to, because of the way that we're experiencing them and playing with them, we are mostly fixated on that experience or like communicating with other people. So my point is, if you pick something that isn't an animated children's film, just do make sure that it's something that you are deeply familiar with and you can pull very specific examples that you want to then analyze in a later date. Okay, so just keep that in mind. But you're going to read step 1 here, and you're going to complete step 1. All right, so once you do that, what I want you to do, and save that as a Google document, okay? The next thing I want you to do once you've done that part of your homework is to head over to Pop Literacy Channel 2 on Slack. And all you're going to do is you are going to like first type just like a, like 3 to 4 minute explanation, 3 to 4 sentence, like, hey, this is what I was trying to work on. Here's some questions I have, like, what details do I need, that kind of thing. So you're just basically being like, this is what I wrote about my free write. Here's some questions I have about how I might improve it or expand it or whatever. Okay. So that's what you're going to do. You're going to type that 3 to 4 sentences, and then you're going to share a link to your draft, right? So keep that in mind. Now, the other thing that becomes really, really important, okay, is that this is going to be the first time that you're sharing a Google Doc with your peers. So let me just show you what I mean here. So I'm going to just kind of create a document. Let me get out of that. Okay, let me do it. All right, all right. So I'm just gonna put this is a draft. Okay, cool. Now, obviously, you're gonna be typing for 45 minutes. You know, you're not gonna have that. But the idea is you'll have this, you'll title it something, right? Now, when you're going to go and share it on Slack, it's really important to follow the step. You're gonna click this share button right here, all right? Now, you see how it says share with Kent State University? Some of y'all are like logged into G Suite with your personal stuff or whatever, but these things are really important. The first thing you're going to do is you are going to go down here. You see how this is just Kent State University? You're going to change this to how you're going to say, so it says anyone with the link can access. And you can leave it as a viewer, that's fine, or you can do it as like a commenter, all right? And what that means is then the people will be able to, I think it's a nice thing to do to actually allow people to comment on it, because then they can like, highlight something that you've said and like add a comment on your document. And that ends up being a lot more helpful, and you're helping yourself if you do that, because then people will not just be able to like read it and then respond in Slack to you, but they will be able to actually highlight, your stuff. So now that you've got this is anyone with the link can access this and they can comment on it, you're going to click copy link and then, press done. And then if I go over back here to Slack, I'm going to be like, here is my paper. This is what I have a question about. Now, obviously, you will say much more intelligent things. You can either just use Command V, that's paste if you're on a Mac. I think it's the same thing in PC, or you can paste it that way. The other thing that you can do is you could also like hyperlink your paper in there. So you just highlight my paper, and then I just press that little link icon, and then you can like share your post that way, all right? And so that links to your paper. And then if someone went to this, they could see that they could like comment it, and see it'll actually even include a thing that's got your, a link to your Google Doc right in there. Okay, now I'm going to delete that because that's like obviously just silly, but that is how you do that. Make sure you do that correctly. Okay, so that's what you're going to do, is you're just going to share your free write. And then the last thing I want you to do is just to kind of quickly read and take notes on this piece called Generating Ideas for Your Paper. The reason why you're going to do this is because you are going to use this information from this reading, and you are going to basically use that to help your peers think about how they can expand their paper, okay? So that is what we're doing in class, and that is what we're doing for homework, okay? Take care.